Hi, my name is Asé Mora. I'm a reporter with Xpress Magazine, and today I'm here with Hannah Clark-Nixon, Xpress Magazine managing editor. Today we'll be discussing her work and reporting as a woman of color in the newsroom. Hi, Hannah.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm so good. Thank you for joining me today.
Of course, I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, me too. Can you get us started by just telling me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm actually a transfer student, so I got here in 2024, 2 years ago, which is crazy. But I'm also a journalism major and a women and gender studies minor, and I am graduating in the spring of this year, so super excited. It's been a long journey for me, so I'm ready.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I also want to talk a little bit about your journey to journalism. I know you mentioned before to me that you were studying communications.
Yeah, I was at University of Oregon in Eugene, Oregon, not the Beavers, the Ducks. Don't get it twisted. But yeah, I was there from 2017 to 2020. So I was there during COVID, which kind of rocked the boat a little bit. But I was doing journalism and communications with a emphasis in public relations. It was a little more press release kind of vibes instead of on the ground journalism reporting. So I transferred to SF State in 2024, like I said. I've always been really passionate about writing. I think it stemmed just from journaling growing up, being able to express myself in that way. And I grew up in Newport Beach, California, which is a predominantly white town in Southern California. I think I was one of maybe 5 or 6, maybe 8 max Black kids at my school. So I didn't have that kind of community, and I found that through writing. Yeah, that's kind of where my love of it started. And then once I realized that I could amplify other voices that kind of experience that isolation like I did, it sparked my love of reporting and being able to report in those kinds of communities.
Can you tell me a little about what that transition was like, you coming here to San Francisco and then the journalism department here at SF State that's a little bit more diverse?
Such a stark difference. Bailey's the editor-in-chief of Xpress Magazine, and we just spoke at a ACP panel discussion here in San Francisco about funding and how to revive a magazine from ground zero. And we touched a lot on the lack of funding nationwide that a lot of universities are facing, specifically in liberal arts and journalism departments. And we definitely see that at our student publications at SF State of kind of having to maximize the resources that we do have because the funding isn't there. It was the complete opposite experience at Oregon. It was kind of like you had everything that you wanted at your fingertips because it's just on a different level. So coming here, it was different, and I have so much respect for the students that are here because everyone's grinding 24/7 trying to put out their best work. And not to say that people weren't doing that at Oregon, but it's just a different kind of energy here, and I have a lot of respect for the people in our department, the faculty. Everyone puts their heart into what they do, and they're really appreciative to be here. So it was a refreshing transition, if anything.
And now that you're here, you've kind of had the opportunity to branch out and really write the stories that you want to write about and are meaningful to you. So what kind of stories do you like to tell?
I mentioned before my minor is women and gender studies, so I like to put my perspective on what I've learned through that curriculum into my writing. I did a prison reform kind of education pipeline story with our managing editor at the time, Olivia Mendez, which was a really extensive piece in it. I was able to educate myself a lot, the incarceration world, and didn't know a lot about it, and was able to amplify voices of young and old Black men specifically throughout the Bay Area who have experienced this kind of criminalization and lack of education to achieving success. So that's a story that I was really excited to write and eventually publish. And then I also wrote a story that I had a lot of fun with on the history, but also gentrification of Black communities within San Francisco, specifically in the Fillmore district, which was in a historically Black neighborhood, and it's kind of experienced mass gentrification over the last several decades. I got to tie in Black hair legacy and the lack of Black hair care and braiders and all the things that Black women depend on for basic hygiene that doesn't really exist in the city. So yeah, just trying to highlight people and places that feel close to me and that I can relate to.
Something that I think is pretty normal in the journalism industry is the idea of objective reporting. But I think when it comes to reporters of color, sometimes those stories can feel really close to home. Were there any moments during your reporting that felt really, really relatable to you, that kind of tugged on your heartstrings a little bit?
Maybe not so much relatable, but when I was writing the prison reform and recidivism story, hearing the experiences of childhood trauma came up a lot for a lot of my sources, and I don't relate to this in any capacity, but I think it highlighted experiences that a lot of people in the Black community face that aren't often talked about, and in my life don't know a ton of people who have experienced that. So I think when you hear these stories firsthand from people who are sitting in front of you telling you these traumas and these experiences, it really puts into perspective that this is actually happening to people, more people than you probably realize. It was kind of just a pivotal moment for me in my reporting skills too, of how to ask these really tough questions to people who experience really traumatic things in their life. And I was grateful enough to talk to a lot of sources that were vulnerable with me and open and honest. So I'm really appreciative of that. So yeah, that was a really inspiring moment for me within the last semester or so.
One of my inspirations for wanting to do this podcast was my own reporting on a story about ADHD and how it presents in Black Americans, and how Black Americans are less likely to be diagnosed or to be diagnosed later on in life. Something I was speaking to a psychiatrist about for that piece was the idea of cultural competency and having some sense of relatability to the people that you are reporting on. So I wanted to ask you, how does that translate to your reporting as a Black woman? Because you do highlight a lot of Black voices in majority, if not all, of your pieces. What draws you to that? Why do you feel connected to those people? And why do you think that it's easier for you to maybe connect with them and have that honest, vulnerable exchange with these people?
I think it kind of goes back to growing up and not having those kinds of people in my life. I didn't have a lot of Black friends. A lot of the Black side of my family, my dad's side, all live in Houston. I'm from Southern California. I wasn't really in those types of spaces, and I've always craved that. And I think having the opportunity now to go down any avenue that I want to report on, I gravitate towards that because it's something that I've always craved in my own life. And I think I've been able to kind of use it as an outlet to build those connections with people that I haven't been able to have growing up. And I think even in my adult life, still actively seeking those things out. And I think it brings me closer to kind of achieving those dreams of being surrounded by a Black community, because it's been such an absence in my life. And I think a lot of young people have similar experiences growing up in predominantly white spaces. Especially, I think it's like your parents want you to have a great education, so they put you in this school, and why does this school only have 2 Black kids and that's considered the good school? It's just kind of an endless cycle of trying to find your people and not being able to, because I don't know what it is, but a lack thereof. And so, yeah, I think it's just me seeking out that community for myself and being able to use it in a therapeutic sense. But of course, not being biased or trying not to be.
Another thing that I wanted to touch on was the idea of diverse people being in the newsroom and the importance of diverse people being in the newsroom to even have the conscious thought to seek out those voices. And I think that kind of directly conflicts with the idea of objective reporting and being partly removed from the issues that you're reporting on. In your own opinion, what do you think the media's role in social justice or aspiring change or protecting vulnerable groups?
A little bit of background too. I work in a professional setting. I'm in marketing and business development in the architect and structural engineering industry in San Francisco. So being able to see what diversity can do in a professional setting like that is really impactful. I'm lucky enough to work in a space that really prioritizes diversity and culture. I think that set the bar really high for me on bringing that to my newsroom and how I want to manage my staff and my reporters. It's kind of like you don't know what you don't know if you haven't experienced it. And unless you are a Black woman, an Asian man, identify as non-binary, you're not going to have those perspectives to bring to the table and offer at your pitch meetings. I think being able to cultivate a space that has diversity and has those different perspectives and nuances can only bring abundance to your publication and the stories that you're able to produce. I see it a lot in our editing workflows and processes as well, but it's just interesting because everyone can bring a new and fresh perspective dependent on their own lived experiences. So I think media plays a really big role in distributing honest and factual information about groups that we wouldn't otherwise hear about.
I looked back to a few of your stories, Aging with Pride, the story you did about prison and education, and A Living Archive, which is about Black hair and the history of Black hair and gentrification, pushing out Black culture from the city. It seems like we keep running into these same issues every couple decades, especially with things happening currently, like our current administration. What do you think the importance of revisiting these issues that seem to be reappearing every couple decades as a reporter?
Journalists are so important for so many reasons, but they are kind of like history books. We're producing these things that are constantly changing in some capacities, but also some of these topics, LGBTQ rights, the prison industrial complex, these things have existed forever, but there's different nuances to them, I think, every decade or so. And I think it's important to continue to talk about them and bring light to them, because who else is going to do that? As journalists seek out stories and conflict and joy and all of the things that no one else is actively doing. And that's our job, is to give that information to the public, because otherwise, who's going to know about it? Nobody.
Final question to you was, what was your most memorable moment during your entire career reporting on Express?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. I have like such an attachment to that prison reform story. My main subject, I also did a project on for a short documentary that we were both in together last semester. His name is Brian A.C. Gonzalez, and he's part of the Project Rebound program at SF State, which is a program that creates structure for formerly incarcerated people to achieve higher education once they are released. He was just so inspiring to me, and I think I felt really privileged enough to be able to talk to him, and I since then have been seeking out more things that I can do in my own personal life to amplify people within the prison industrial complex and learning more about that industry and how profitable it is. I find it so fascinating, and I think we are able to have an impact on people more than we think we do. So, and I'm saying that Brian was that to me. So I think that was a really memorable experience for me. I went to San Quentin, and I had never been there before, to a prison before in general. So I think just creating that whole story and absorbing this new sector of the world was really formative for me and what my interests are for the future and stories and people that I want to investigate as I grow my career. really proud of all of the work that our staff has currently done this semester, and this is my first time in a editor role on a student publication, so it's been a great learning experience, and I'm just grateful for everyone and all of the effort, all of the time and energy that people put into making this publication what it is, and I'm excited to see what we do for grad issue, and yeah, grateful for it all.
Thank you so much, Hannah.
Thank you.
This has been Asé Mora with Xpress Magazine. Thank you for listening.